The other day, I was looking through my old videos and I realized my thumbnails suck. I was getting click-through rates that I didn't think were possible, and if I want to make this whole YouTube thing work, then I should practice. So I recreated popular thumbnails as a noob, and this is what happened. While doing some research, I came across this thumbnail from Mr. Beast, and you knew I was gonna choose him, not because I liked the thumbnail, but because it was an excuse to use my drone. So after getting some cinematic and overhead video, I was able to get this shot. Not bad. Now time to load up Photoshop and see what I could do. I brought in my assets and immediately started centering myself, just like Mr. Beast, only to realize I need more grass. Then I used my lasso tool to copy and paste parts, then blend it in together so it looks like one giant piece of grass. I used the hue saturation layer to get my grass looking nice and green, and then meticulously erased it from my body so I don't look like the offspring from the Hulk and the Sleeping Beauty. Once I got to the iconic red circle, I thought it was gonna be easy. But I was wrong. I lowered the opacity, changed the blend mode, and it still looked like trash. I eventually brought another red circle in from Google, but it still looked bad, so we'll get to the red circle later. Adding the text was by far the easiest step. And it's not hard to find the font that Mr. Beast uses. All it takes is one Google search and you find out it's Obelix Pro. I think I said that right.
Obelix Pro.
Close enough. After resizing the text to 34.6, the only thing missing was the stroke. Since I couldn't take a picture of the patch of dirt, I had to bring it in manually. So after decreasing the size and erasing some parts, I'm stuck with this. But the only way to put it underneath me was to crop myself out, so I used the quick selection tool. Then I ended up warping the dirt, and boom. Not bad, but I'm not done yet, and it only gets harder from here. I finally went back to the red circle and decided that the only way to make it look realistic was if I used the brush tool. So I changed my brush to Kyle's Paintbox Wet Blender 50, and I have zero regrets. Unfortunately, I can't draw a perfect circle, and I didn't bother to look up how to make one, so I'm stuck with this. Realistically, I could be done here and call it a day, but I'm just getting started. I spent the first 36 minutes getting up to this point, but the next 36 minutes is what really makes a difference. And here's the final product. Total time, 1 hour, 13 minutes. Now let's make things a bit harder. I don't own a giant hamster wheel or a Tesla, so my main goal is getting the right pose, which turned out to be, well, you could see for yourself. I started bringing in my assets, then went straight to using this pen tool to remove the background from my Tesla. Then I did the same thing with the Tesla shirt, the big hamster wheel, the red battery, and finally, myself. Which I didn't do a good job, but we'll get back to that later. I used warp to shape the Tesla into place and match it as close to the thumbnail as possible. Decrease the size of the battery box, flip the hamster wheel horizontally, and place the red battery into place. We have the major components in place, but things are about to get difficult. I went back to myself and used the quick selection tool, only to realize that's not gonna work, and I'm gonna have to do things manually. I switched to the pen tool, but that's gonna take far too long, and since I know I have a steady surgeon's hand, I chose the lasso tool and went to work. This took a while, but it was peaceful and enjoyable just watching the background slowly disappear until I'm left with a near perfect cutout of myself. Except for my blurry hands, but we don't have to talk about that. After aligning myself with Eric, I realized I have a lot of work to do, but beforehand, I gotta fix the hamster wheel. The shoes are still there, so I'm gonna have to use the patch tool to erase them from existence, and boom, I did a pretty good job. Now my favorite part, color grading. I added a huge saturation layer on the hamster wheel to match the original as close as possible. Brought back myself, removed unnecessary body parts, and got rid of the Adidas stripes. I started darkening my clothes so I can finally put on the infamous Tesla logo, which I used lighten mode. I added the red charging wires, made a charging latch, and finally added the text, 1% charged. This is what I have so far, but now comes the most important part, the details. And here's the final product. Total time, 1 hour, 24 minutes. The last thumbnail was the hardest because I had to recreate this. I was scared I would get hurt, but I had nothing to worry about, thanks to my sponsor, Aura. If you're worried about your information like your name, email, or phone number falling into the wrong hands, then Aura could help. They protect your privacy by working 24/7 to help remove your personal information from unwanted sites. Aura also has an all-in-one app where you can get fraud alerts ASAP if a threat occurs. And you even get an antivirus protection and a password manager, which I personally use, so I know my information is safe. I'd recommend you give Aura a shot for 14 days for free at aura.com/ChrisBarros, and you won't regret it. Unlike me regretting trying to take this picture, only to realize I'm not strong enough. Thank goodness Photoshop exists.
I hope that's enough.
After bringing in my pictures, I realized I had to flip them horizontally and then I could begin. I used the selection tool to select myself, which ended up taking a while, especially because of my hair. Maybe a perm was a bad idea. Part of my foot's missing, but we'll fix that later. I did the same thing with the other pictures and then started aligning it with Mike Shake, only to end up disappointed. My pose wasn't even close, but this will have to do. After setting up both pics, I had to find a way to merge them, and so I started using the lasso tool to get rid of unnecessary body parts. Again, I'm basically Frankensteining two photos together and trying to make it as realistic as possible, which so far is turning out better than I thought. And after doing some more editing, this is what I wound up with. Fixing my foot wasn't a bad idea either. I noticed the thumbnail had an uneven gray background, so I tried to match it as close as possible, and even getting the darker parts. Now the biggest thing missing was the shadow, and this was one of the most difficult parts. I used the brush tool, which ended up being too dark, so I quickly erased it, but it was never perfect, so I left it as is. I added an exposure layer to darken up the parts, and only applied it to my shorts and hair. Then another exposure layer, but this time to brighten up my teeth. After messing with the hue saturation layer, I wound up with this, and the only thing missing was the text. Total time, 34 minutes. So recreating these thumbnails were fun, and although they weren't the best, they did give me the practice and prove to myself that I can do it. But maybe I was focusing on the wrong thing. The point of a thumbnail is to get somebody to click on your video. But if the video isn't good, then what's the point of clicking on it? So right now my goal is to go ahead and make better videos, and maybe putting so much focus in thumbnails isn't the best idea. But yeah. Thanks for watching.